Nu ska det handla om någonting annat. Sommaren 1990 var Cathy 17 år och Matty, hennes bror och bästa vän, var 16 år gammal. På väg hem från en fest så blev Matty påkörd och det enda Cathy ber om och hoppas på där och då är att han ska överleva. Och det gör han. Han överlever i 8 år utan att någonsin vakna eller bli kontaktbar igen. Då bestämmer Cathy och hennes föräldrar att de ska sluta hålla honom vid liv. Och just där och då så var det inte tillåtet med aktiv dödshjälp utan de får då tillstånd att stänga av näringstillförseln. Det betyder i praktiken att han svälter ihjäl. Det här är Cathys stora sorg i livet, det som förändrade allt för alltid. Och hon berättar den här historien i sin bok som heter Allt för min bror. Cathy var på Sverigebesök för en vecka sedan och då fick jag och fotograf Felix Larne möjlighet att träffa henne.
They told us they were going to operate on him. They were going to operate on his brain. And we sat in a little waiting room for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And then eventually the surgeon came and he said to my dad, "I've saved your son's life, but we don't know yet whether that was the right thing to have done." And again, at the time, I just didn't even really understand that. I didn't really know what that meant. All I wanted was for Matty to be alive. I just couldn't cope with the thought that he might die. I just wanted him to be alive. We just desperately wanted him to be alive. And I didn't know that it wasn't just a case of being alive or being dead. So now I know there is a big area between life and death. There's a whole area. But I didn't know that at the time. It was just a straight choice, alive or dead. And of course, I really wanted him to be alive. So that was all I cared about, that he would live.
For how long would you say that you continued to hope for a sign that he was actually there?
I mean, I hoped a very long time. And I think that it sounds so silly now, but I genuinely thought I could love him better. I thought I could love him back to life. I thought with enough hope and optimism and love that we could make a difference. And of course, that is sort of the way people talk. People say, like, where there's life, there's hope. And nurses kept saying to us, oh, it's a lot to do with you now. If he wants to, talk to him, you might be able to make him wake up. And I thought all those things were true. So we poured all these huge efforts into trying to entertain him, and I was always talking to him and singing to him and making tapes for him and being with him. And not just me, his friends came and people came and played the guitar to him, and we did all sorts of things. But nothing ever really worked. But it was really, I think it was a good couple of years before I accepted, even to myself, that I didn't think he was going to get better. And then it was another couple of years before I finally realised, actually, it would have been better if he'd died the night he was knocked over. It's how you think about it. Once I started thinking, would Matty like to be alive like this? That became a very obvious answer. If the question is, can I love this body where he no longer is, but I loved him? That's a very difficult question. But if you just ask yourself the question, would he like to be alive like this? It's a very simple answer. And he wouldn't like to be alive like this because nobody would like to be alive like that.
And what kind of thoughts did you have about if it was wrong to do it?
Well, I think it feels profoundly against everything that you think you know about being a human being. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult. Because how could I have ever foreseen a time that I would want my brother to die, where I would want the person I love most to die? How could I ever have foreseen that? And I think what I eventually have realised is that it's that he shouldn't have been kept alive in the first place. That's sort of where the problem is. And I really see now that because we can now keep people alive when we really shouldn't be able to, we haven't caught up with that. We haven't caught up ethically, legally, morally, psychologically, philosophically. We haven't caught up with our ability to prolong life in that way. So we don't know what to do. And often it's the families who find it very difficult to cope with and who sort of splinter and fall into despair.
Is it okay for you to tell me about the moment when you actually shut the machines off?
Yes, so the only way, so the court agreed that it'd be better for him to be dead, but the only legal way to do that is what's called withdrawal of nutrition and hydration. And the legal thinking behind that is it has to be a withdrawal of treatment rather than a positive action, which I understand legally, but of course then that is another cruel and horrible thing. So what we did is we had to, and we just did it in our home, you know, we got a hospital bed and put it in my parents' bedroom, and Matty died there. And we'd been told it would take about 10 days, but it actually took 13 days. And I'd hoped that by being with Matty while he died, I could maybe sort of erase those 8 years for him, I suppose. I'd hoped it would be a bit like we'd be back in the road. But what I'd learned from the 8 years since being in the road with him was that I wasn't praying for him to live at all costs anymore. That I knew that it was a terrible, terrible shame. He wasn't going to be with us anymore, but that it'd be better for him to be died. So I think I hoped that it would feel sort of peaceful and reflective. But it didn't feel like that for me.
But isn't it too much to carry, to have to see him for 13 days?
Yeah. I now think it's not surprising, is it, that on day 10 I was going mad. It's really not surprising. And I do wonder, like, where were the other people? You know, where were the people? Why were none of these lawyers? You know, we were surrounded by all these people. Why were none of them saying, you know, and look after yourselves a bit? Why did none of them say to my parents, get that nice daughter of yours a decent therapist when this is all over? Why did nobody said that? So
it's a strange question, but you know when you have a pet?
Yeah.
They're sick, they're ill, and you take them to someone that helps them not to suffer.
Years later, my friend Sophie, my best friend Sophie, I was living with her, and she had a cat called Minnie, and Minnie was 19 and was very poorly. And everybody in the family thought Minnie probably had come to the end of the road, and nobody wanted to take her to the vet. And I said, I'll take Minnie to the vet, because they'd done a lot for me, and I thought it was a nice thing. And I took Minnie to the vet, and the vet said, yes, she's come to the road. And I held Minnie and I stroked her, and the vet gave her a little injection, and she sort of went, meow, and she died. And it was so beautiful. And at the time, I did think, we treat our pets so much better than we treated my brother. And actually people on death row as well. You know, I think it was just, it's such a horrible thing to do. People told me that time would heal, and I just sort of waited there for time to make me feel better, which never happened. Whereas I now see that actually time was never going to heal that. So I now think, I would say, and it's tough love really, but I would say, right, life as you knew it is over, it's gone. You can't have it back. But there is another life for you. And you can start thinking about how you want to be in that new life. And that's what I think and it sounds very simple, but it's a big thing, and it's a very different way to think. And that's what I try to do now. And I'm not always very good at it, but I do know that the best thing for me, again, focus on what I've got in front of me, and try not to sort of mope and pine and yearn for what's gone. I don't always achieve that very well, as you can see right this second.
But I think that you're conscious about it, and that's the whole difference.
Yeah, definitely, yes, yes.
What do you miss most of all with Maddie?
I miss being a sister, and I miss being a sister of a brother, I think. There's something very specific about that sibling relationship. And he didn't ever really let me get away with anything. You know, I miss the teasing and the joshing. And again, that's difficult to replicate with people you're not related to in a way. Because you're always nervous you'll offend people, aren't you? Whereas there's this great sort of, when it's someone where you used to like try and beat each other into a pulp when you were little, there's just this great sort of freedom that you can do whatever you like and you'll be forgiven. So I miss that, and I miss the... I try not to think about this. It still makes me too sad. I miss what might have been, you know. So I miss that he'd have had kids, and I miss... I try not to dwell on it. I miss the fact that my son would have cousins that were his children. So I still feel really sad about that. But, you know, but now what is good, what is a positive thing, is that I do at least feel glad that I had him, that I had those years. So at one point, I used to think about that thing, it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And I wasn't sure it was true, actually. But now I've come to see that you know, grief is the price we pay for love. So, and if you love people a lot, sooner or later you will experience grief. And obviously I experienced it a bit young and in a hard way, in a hard and cruel way.
Your mother said this was the last really good thing that we could do for him.
Yeah, yeah. The last act of love. But I've realised again that the real last act of love for people when they leave us is to learn how to live well without them. And that if you imagine if you've lost someone you loved, if you imagine what they could say to you, it would probably be a variant of what my brother now says to me, which is along the lines of, "What are you still worrying about this for? Go off and do something else. Why are you still sitting around crying? Go on, get out of here, go do something nice. Walk around Stockholm, it's a beautiful city. Shut up talking about me."